what I want to do first, I'm just going to navigate kind of the way that I normally make my way to the matrix system and ITSORealEstate.ca. So I'll just type that in. ITSORealEstate.ca should be pretty used to, running into the kind of the Clarity login where you end up putting in your OM ID and password. So that here. And one thing that's pretty significant when you go to log in, perhaps for the very first time of the day, perhaps your session time has expired and you're just logging back in type of thing. Well, what you'll notice is that there is this transition dashboard that comes up, and it does have a single sign-on to some of the other applications that you may end up using. This is something that ITSO is currently kind of reworking, making sure all these are kind of up and running as far as applications. But the one that we're generally looking for, right, is ITSO Matrix. So just clicking on that very first one is going to get us into this new tab, which I'm going to zoom in on. I do see perhaps a couple of members joining us on tablets or iPhones, smartphones, things like that. So hopefully this is kind of much better view, a little bit more zoomed in. Now that I'm on ITSORealEstate.ca as well, and I'm kind of logged into Matrix, maybe I could just kind of get rid of that transition dashboard. And we're left with this main tab, the one that we're able to search the MLS system with, all that fun stuff. There is before we kind of want to give you an idea of the agenda in a second, like what are the steps that we're going to cover and the things that we're going to discuss in today's session. Just before I do that, though, there is a resource that I want to show you really quick. I'm already seeing I'm already seeing them getting caught by it a little bit in the chat. As far as yes, today's session is being recorded for those that are wondering, and you can absolutely access these recordings at a later time. Okay, how you do that is through your members area on the board website. So I think I'll show you that first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the agenda. Okay, so once you're on Matrix, I find that the easiest way to get through to that private section of your member details is actually by getting into Matrix first, and then tracking down your external links widget. So it's this one here, right? You'll notice that my dashboard probably looks a little bit different than yours, right? Remembering you can absolutely move around all of these applications. We're going to talk about that more shortly. But if you can track down external links, so a specific widget here that you have access to, okay, what you want to click on is this red link members area. When you make that selection, it pops open a new tab, which you'll be able to see members.omdreb.on.ca. That's the Oakville board website. And this is like your private information with regards to your membership. Whole bunch of good stuff here on the left-hand side to show you just specifically where you can access the recordings. They are stored in the video training bank. So if I click on video training bank, this top portion is our current rotation for the webinars. Very, very first one being the introduction to ITSO Real Estate. So if you ever wanted to just rewatch this at your own leisure, if you wanted to kind of follow along for a particular topic when it comes to it, right, you could just click on that one, watch the video, and hop to the spot that interests you. This video training bank is also an archive for a whole bunch of different professional development ones. If our events department has any keynote speakers that are putting on a webinar or a session, and they happen to provide us with a recording for that session, it does get posted here and updated into this video training bank. Okay, so really, really good resource there. Just remember, if you ever want to access that, make your way to Matrix, find external links, and click on members area. And on the left-hand side, you just click on video training bank, and you're off and running with that one. Now, since we did talk a little bit about the dashboard, maybe I'll say some extra words about that one. Okay, so when you do make your way into Matrix, this kind of main dashboard, you'll notice you have some menu options across the top. There's a little bit of a tucked away menu here when you click on the spot where you're logged in, perhaps. Really important thing to notice, though, is that the rest of the screen, when you look a little bit lower down, it is made up by these individual widgets. Okay, if I start to close all of these out, so that they're all tucked away, for example, right? I can get my screen down to as basic as possible. It would just end up having a news and alerts, right? This section where some of the main messages, perhaps from your brokerage, also a way that the board communicates certain updates through to you. Okay, so the news and alerts is the only one that's like stuck there. It's pasted right up in this left corner. The other one that you're not able to close out completely is the one labeled additional. Okay, and what happens is the additional one is just where all of the individual widgets are stored if you choose to minimize them or close them out. Okay, so perhaps I'm just going to drag out the ones that I may think perhaps we're going to make use of in today's session, something like that. Are there any other ones? Maybe we could even leave it just even as basic as that. And external links we did use, so I'll pull that one out. So for example, just this basic layout for my screen, just making a note, right? My dashboard on Matrix is probably going to look completely different than yours. You can just manipulate that and change it around yourself as you start to use these applications, these little widgets, right? You're going to make your dashboard look in a certain way that's going to be more efficient for yourself. So mine's going to be totally different than yours. Okay. If there's ever one that I refer to, if I say, hey, we need that hot sheets widget because it's part of how we conclude today's session, well, you may have to just track yours down, right? If it's closed out, you just drag it back onto the screen, and then we can talk about that one later. Awesome. So that's your dashboard and your widgets in a little bit of a nutshell there. As far as the agenda for today's session, however, okay, there's two main topics that I'm going to be focusing on. The very first topic just has to do with some of the settings that you're going to want to kind of hop in and approach before you start sending listings to clients. So we're going to talk all about, hey, like how do I update my professional information that's, you know, public facing? How do I change my email, or maybe I just want my mobile phone number to go to Realtor.ca, things like that. So we're going to tackle things to do with the profile in our first half of the session. And as soon as we're completed with that, topic number 2 is everything to do with, approaching searches. When we're on Matrix, we know we have a whole bunch of different ways to search, right? We have a search widget. Perhaps there's a speed bar search here in the middle of the screen, recent searches, a search dropdown. Okay, like Matrix there's a lot of different ways that you can approach searches. So we're going to spend the whole second half of the session just kind of setting up different strategies, how you would approach different searches for different reasons, and then get to kind of a really solid foundation for approaching those features. Okay, topic 1, settings. Topic 2, the search function. Let's go ahead and start talking about that profile information. Okay, and the thing is, your different profile information, your settings, in reality, they are in a couple of different obscure spots. So I'll try and organize it in a way that you can, just kind of approach them one at a time. Make sure you know all the different areas where your settings come into play. Let's see here. One of the very, very first ones to notice is when you go into this menu, right, where it says just hello and your name where you're logged in. If you click on this menu, you get a little drop down where you have a settings option. If I hover my matrix, I end up having the very same titled settings here. Either one of these, the one on the right or the one on the left here from my matrix, they will take me to the same spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on settings. That'll be our very first one. Brings me into a screen where I have multiple options that I can configure, make changes to. One we're going to focus on is my information, managing our personal branding and options. When we go and we click on this option, what we'll notice is, well, first off, we're faced with a little bit of an information screen here. And at the same time, this seems to be all grayed out. Doesn't seem to be giving me an option like, hey, what if my brokerage, the phone number has changed slightly, or maybe this was a different line that I wanted to switch over, change those settings a little bit. Well, you're not going to end up doing this from this particular screen. Okay, the important thing to note for this personal and kind of public facing information is that the distribution form is in fact on your board website. We saw the board website a second ago when we were looking at the video training bank. So getting to the spot where we fill out this form, a really similar path. So we'll start with this one. So updating our information. I'm going to click on this Oakville Milton District Real Estate Board logo. It'll take me back to the dashboard. And what we're looking for, in fact, is external links once again. We're going to go to our members area. That's where we're going to find the form which holds all of our membership information. So if I click on that, okay, we can tell here we're pretty familiar with this spot, right? We've come here recently. We have things like our profile. We can get our transaction history, things like billing settings. The one that we do want is, in fact, my profile. When you make your way into this option, okay, again, remembering this is the Oakville board website, you have a form that you can fill out with a whole bunch of different boxes here, right? Things like, you'll notice I'll have a profile picture on here. When we go down, there's a save option towards the bottom. Okay, so anything that I update in here, it's in fact coming from this distribution form and then making its way over to the settings into that My Information section. Okay, so everything that's grayed out here, I can't change it specifically on Matrix because it actually comes from this form right here. So let's have a quick look at it. If I was, for example, looking to update my primary email, right? What if this changed? What if I switched brokerages and well, I don't want to make one up here, but let's say I changed to a different brokerage perhaps, and I just had to update this on file, right? Well, you can just make your way here pretty quickly into that members area from your external links widget, change your email, hit the save button at the bottom, okay? As well, really similarly, okay? And this one is a pretty important one. I do get kind of members call me on the phone pretty often about this specific one. When you want to have your mobile phone number going through to multiple places, okay? The first thing you're going to do is enter in the information. I'll just make one up here, okay? When it comes to the mobile number, however, just notice that there's a second entry that might be required. Just below the box here after you make the change, would you like this to show through on Realtor.ca? There's a little bit of like a Y or an N for yes or no. So if I wanted this to update through, I would maybe change those little kind of toggles here because I want this to now be public facing. If I want it to be available, anybody can contact me that way. If you want your mobile number to be public, you can just kind of make that switch. Just notice it's a two-parter, right? By default, it is set to no, but you can just change it to yes and go ahead and save at the bottom for this update. The only things you aren't able to change yourself are these kind of 3 or 4 boxes that are grayed out. So like if I had a legal name change or anything like that, well, I would just send a quick email to the membership department and they can make that change for me. Or if I did need to transfer across brokerages, the actual brokerage name or address, right? Just those couple of boxes, I would send an email to the membership department. Everything else you can do yourself though, right? If your office phone number changes, your mobile number, email, all that type of stuff you do have access to, save at the bottom, okay? Profile picture is a bit different. We'll talk about that one last, okay? But this is your distribution form for all of that information. Close that up. Now, next up, a couple of other settings that we have in this section, right? We're just in the My Information section right now under Settings. A couple that we're going to tackle are both email signature as well as the header and footer. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, right? You can see that I can put together a bit of an email signature, save this for when I'm sending listings to clients. I'm going to pull up a really quick preview here. So maybe just don't follow along in this particular part. I'm just going to click email. I chose a random listing here. So if I was to email this listing, right, you'll notice that I have a signature here. I can always edit it while I'm in this page. Okay, but the other thing that I want to show you is this preview, because one of the settings that we're going to make changes to is called the header and the footer. So there's a really important concept to get our minds around when we're communicating listings to clients. What happens is we're sending our clients access to an interactive portal where they view the listing information. Okay, and what I mean by that is if I was to just choose a random listing, it just happened to be 2446 Whistling Springs Crescent, right? If I'm just choosing this listing and I'm emailing it to a client, they're not getting, they're not just getting a printed version of a listing. They're not just getting a PDF version or anything like that. What they're getting is this interactive portal where they can see the listing information. They have interactive maps to work within. They can go further, look into the photos. There's perhaps even some more interactive tools that they can make use of while they're inside of this portal. Okay, so really important to understand what we're sending our clients is a way to view the listing information, and we call that the client portal. So in our settings, for example, you can notice here at the top of my screen, it's in the portal as the listing representation, or as the whichever representation you may be in this case while you're sharing the information. It states some information about yourself, right? You're the representation. It shows your name, perhaps some additional branding information. There's also, by default, just this large dark banner at the top that isn't doing anything. First thing we're going to do is tackle, how to make some changes to that. So if I go back into my settings and follow it up with my information, what we're looking to do is we're trying to spice that up a little bit before we start sending listings and client portals over to our clients. We probably want to make some quick changes here. Okay, the first one we'll tackle, let's do that email signature. I find this one's pretty quick, so we'll start with this one. And what you'll notice is when you're editing your email signature, you have tools that you can use to recreate a signature, right? You can import images, URLs, things like that. You can use these tools at the top. It's almost like HTML based. If you prefer that to create your signature. What I find, however, and if you're following along, this might be a little bit of maybe something to keep for later on when you're in front of a computer, right? If you're like on an iPhone or iPad kind of thing, this might be a little bit tough, but let me show you the part that I find easiest is if you just go ahead and you bring in an email that you already have the signature created in. Just copying it and dropping it into that section is going to bring in all of the hyperlinks. So I find that that's really the easiest option. If your email signature is just one big banner image, just kind of select it like I'm doing here, and you could just kind of copy and paste it in. Rather than using these kind of ancient tools here, this HTML-based creation, right? You just end up copying and pasting it in, and it takes care of everything, the hyperlinks, right? There are already hyperlinks built in. The whole setup of the signature is already ready to go. Always, always, always go with the copy paste option. I find is much easier there. So if I show you one more time here, all I did was I went to my email service, which just happens to be Outlook, found, just by creating, I just clicked on new email. You could see I haven't filled out any information, but just with the signature, I go ahead and I copy that into the space, hit save, and then I'm ready to go with that. Okay. So that's one taken care of. The other one here, we're going to follow it up with that portion of the header and footer. Okay, so we're starting to see, right, even here, just some previews of how we can kind of change it up. If I scroll down, there's a whole bunch of different kind of built-in options that we can set it to, even to kind of start out. But I think the one that most kind of members are usually interested in is, well, the portal is a private conversation between yourself and your client. You're more than welcome to use your own personal branding, the branding of kind of your business. This is a private section between you and your client. So feel free to make use of this space with a custom image. How you get the custom image though, you do have to navigate away from this first option. By default, I'm on I choose not to use a header and footer at this time. If I select any other option, like even this second one, and then I just click preview, it gives me the actual settings now that I can start working on. Okay, so we navigated away from that, and we can see here, I can either select a different banner image, or I can upload a custom banner image. And that's what I mean by, if you want to bring in a photo that is, an image of your own company, your own branding, your own logo and things like that, you're more than welcome to. This is a space where you can do that. The portal is private between yourself and your client at the end of the day. Okay, and it does provide you with the recommended file size. So you'll see here, image size 1600 by 120 pixels. Right? If you do your own graphics editing, or even if you have a company that does it for you, you can just provide them with those dimensions. That's that, a really long 1600 pixels by 120 pixels high. It's just so it fits properly in this space. So you browse your computer, find the file, okay, kind of browse it in, and you'll see it'll just go straight into that space as you kind of browse it. Given that I don't have a professional photo to bring in there, I am going to use a system default one though. So I'm going to click select a different banner image. Just going to scroll down to one that I like a bit better than that big dark square or rectangle. Maybe I'll go with the couch that I usually go with. Click on preview, and you can see it's already starting to update pretty much straight away. So if you updated and you brought in a custom one, you would just see the preview of it right here. Okay, so right there, like just that small change, big difference compared to this really silly empty space that you would have there to begin with. Okay. The very next one here is, well, what if you would like to have some additional information on this left-hand side? Right? Perhaps a way that your client can reach you via email, phone number, things like that. This is an inquiry that I get on the phone pretty often as well, and I don't blame you. It is kind of it's a little bit tucked away. It has a silly title. It's called branding. And it brings in the information from that screen that we saw earlier, the My Information, and in the information screen that's coming from the board website. If I click on these options, you'll see I have 5 drop downs to fill the space. Okay, I can see Eric Garand was there by default. If I was to put perhaps my email and my office phone number, right? Well, you can see when I click them out of the drop down, right, they're being distributed from the board website through to Matrix, but I can select them, have them available there, and if I go through and I hit save, I've done enough kind of editing and changes at this point, right? I can see that it's looking a lot more professional. Even there, like I'm just using some system defaulted ones, but it's going to look so much better for that client experience when they're going through and looking at listing information in the portal that you provide. Okay, so if I was to even kind of close this out and do the very same thing as before, right? So I saved at the bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a random listing and click on the preview, very similarly to what I did before. If I just click here, click on email, okay, we'll notice that first off, if you remember from before, well, we didn't have this signature in here. We had just updated that. All we did was copy it in, but the hyperlinks are in, the hyperlinked images are available, even from copy pasting it. So good confirmation there. And when we preview the new portal, we should see that update is now available. It looks quite different. This time we ended up on Tesla Crescent with the random listing that we ended up choosing. However, right, it's not just white background, Eric Garand with a big dark rectangle. It's starting to look a little bit more professional, right? And maybe I'm just doing this temporarily while I wait for, my, whatever you call them, like my media, my photographer, or whoever that creates this banner if I want a custom one to match my business. Okay, so really important to update that banner, get it, freshen it up a little bit so it looks more professional. Let's close that up. Awesome. So as far as settings, we've tackled a couple of them already, right? We know that this information, the distribution side of this, comes from the board website in your members area. We've done the signature, we've done the header and footer. One more section that I mentioned we would talk about is how do you get a profile picture, right? If you remember, when we went into my members area, I had a profile picture coming through. This is another one. It is in a little bit of an obscure spot, so definitely follow this one along. Okay. The spot that I'm going in for this actually is under Add Edit, and I'm going to click on Input. If I can make my way there. There we go. When you're in the Input section, all right, and this is kind of for later on, right? In the intermediate session on Thursday, we talk all about the input function. The spot that we're going to go to today, however, is this Realtors section. This is another way that you can access a really specific part of your own personal settings for your account. So what happens is, if I go to Add Edit into the input, and under Realtors, if I type in my OMID, so this is just my OMID. This will only work if you're typing in the OMID of the account you're signed in on. So I'm signed in on, it says hello Eric here. This is my OMID. When I click on Edit, it gives me a couple of additional kind of editing features for my profile. Okay, just some of the things that maybe didn't specifically come from the board website. Maybe there's something tucked away here. And the one that we are looking for is called Manage Photos. This is where your profile picture is stored for Matrix. Okay. If I click on Manage Photos here, you'll notice mine I did upload in. It is that kind of silly mugshot that I have in my desktop background here. Okay, but all you're going to do, right, you kind of have a little bit of a read. You'll notice really quickly, same as before, really similar to that header custom photo that we were talking about. It gives you the recommended file size. So in this case, it's 724 by 1086 would be the recommended size. Mine is highlighted in red because I don't have a professional photo. Mine's just the kind of a photo that I tracked down and I brought over, kind of cropped it to fit slightly, but you'll see it'll still accept it if it's not perfect. But if you're looking to have like a nice professional shot as the face of your business, you're probably going to want to go with the actual pixel size, and you just browse it in. So if I click on Browse, I can select the photo, click Open, and all I have to do is kind of certify and save at the bottom here, and then I'm good to go. And you see it'll kind of load in, it'll save here, and then the next time that you go into your members area, you'll see it update through there. Okay, maybe something really, really quick to note as well. Whenever you make a change, just with the way that these things update between the board website and over to Matrix, and also the other way around for some of these settings, be a little bit patient with it, please. I know some of them that I've seen, right? If I just go and change my email really quick, and then I hop over to Matrix, maybe the change hasn't happened just yet. I know it takes a little while for the cache memory to just update between the websites. I've seen that be like as quick as 5 minutes. Sometimes it's like 15, 20 minutes type of thing. So do be patient with it, but it will absolutely update in the end. So if I went to, what I mean by that is like in my settings here, right? If I know that I went to the board website and I updated this email to something different, do give it a little bit of time for it to come through and, you know, kind of make its way through the distribution form to all the channels. Perfect. You know what? I think I'm going to show you the path one more time for that profile picture because it is a little bit of an obscure one. So just remember, input, OMID in the Realtor section, clicking on Edit, following up with Manage Photos, and here's the spot where you can browse it, certify, and save, and you're good to go. Just going to sneak out of that section, and perfect. Unless I'm missing something, I think we did cover all the kind of the little obscure spots where you have different settings, profile information, things to just kind of update. If it is kind of the you know, typically just that first time that you're making your way into Matrix, some things to kind of tackle and double check, right, before we start sharing listing information and sending out all that stuff to clients. Perfect. Now, what I'd like to do is let's go ahead and just kind of start transitioning now into that second topic. Okay, it's definitely a big one. It's when it comes to using ITSORealEstate.ca and approaching Matrix, right? probably one of the very first things that comes to mind is, well, I mean, we have access to MLS information. Well, the thing that's going to follow is, well, how do I, rationalize all of this massive umbrella of information and data that's available to, kind of funnel it all down to just the specific listings that my client is looking for? It's always kind of the big question there. So let's approach the different tools one at a time. I'll give you some tips and some tricks, and kind of we'll come up with a little bit of a strategy, because at the end of the day, the different types of searches that you're going to run, well, you're going to have different approaches for them. So let's just get really familiar with a couple of these features first. Everything moving forward here, though, is going to be all around the different ways that we run searches. Okay. Before we run our first search, though, there is something that I want to mention, okay? And it's around that idea that we have access to a really vast amount of information here, right? In the end, there are, I think, give or take, I hope that I got the number right, but I think give or take, we're at around 21 boards that share information on ITSORealEstate.ca. So if my client, perhaps, or even a potential client, is asking me, Eric, I'm really interested in a property in Cambridge. Do you have access to listing information in Cambridge? How do I know if the answer is yes or no? Well, the very, very best way to track that down, and what I've found it really, really helpful, is just by going straight to the website for ITSO Systems. Okay, so they've put together this website. We're just going to go there now. ITSO, that's not how you spell it. ITSOsystems.ca. Okay, might get this little pop-up here. I'm going to go continue. And the spot that you just want to go to is under About, under Members of ITSO. This is a list that they've compiled. There's a bit of like a heat map here that shows you the member associations. I was trying to highlight this line here. I know it's a little bit small. Maybe I'll zoom in a bit. There we go. So ITSO member associations, you can see in blue. So you get a visual of kind of how much coverage there is in Southern Ontario here. And as well, the member associations are all listed right here for you. And each one of them provides a link to that board website as well, even with the kind of the board phone number on the right-hand side. So what you would do is, if I made my way to this website, which maybe I'll copy this over, and let me go into the chat. Let me change this to everyone. ITSO, let me call this Boards of ITSO. Copy that in. So you should be seeing that in the chat box. It's just ITSOsystems.ca/member, well, members of ITSO in the end. It's just this link that I've copied in, right? If you want to bookmark this, or however you want to save that, or just as a little reminder to yourself, so that if your client ever asks you, right, you'd be able to, maybe you don't know the answer off by heart, but you can always just get to this website really quickly, and you could give them that yes or no answer. So if the question was, Eric, I'm interested in a property in Cambridge, do you have access to that listing information? Well, I can really quickly just hop over to this area. I can see the list of member associations. I can see very plainly and clearly that Cambridge is part of that. So when searching on our system, I will have access to listing information in the Cambridge area. Okay, you have access to all of the associations that are listed on this screen. Okay. And that's what kind of begs that question, right? When we're approaching it, right? Perhaps just in this specific case, I have a client in Oakville that just wants a specific neighborhood in Oakville. Well, I'm probably going to approach the search a really specific way so that I'm blocking out all that noise on the outside, right? Maybe I don't need the things from, Kawartha Lakes Association of Realtors at this particular time. So how you refine your search is going to be pretty significant. Very first one that we're going to approach here, however, is this search widget. Okay, remembering that mine's probably in a different spot than yours, and if yours is closed out, right, just find it in your additional tab and just kind of drag it back out onto the screen here. But when it comes to this particular widget, it's the best time to use it, and kind of the more specific time that I'm using this all the time here is this search widget, is when I know specific information about a particular property, right? I'm going to use this one when I'm not trying to refine 100 different properties down to some specific criteria. I'm going to use this when I know something specific about this individual property, such as the address, right? I can search by street number, street name, perhaps. Something like 55 Burness. And when I run this search, I would expect to have some really specific results. In this case, it gave me, let's see here, kind of 6 results. We're going to get used to these statuses over time, but I've got kind of 3 that seem to have been closed statuses. So they actually moved, over to a completed sale. These ones perhaps were just listings that were up that expired. But what we're noticing here is maybe we have some historical information. So if I go in here to this 306 number, the one for Burness, I'll just see. I just chose a random property here in St. Catharines for this one, as Burness is pretty unique street name. And I could see things like the sold price, perhaps the date by going down here. When was it that this happened? Looked like it was sometime at the start of 2018 that this property moved and sold. Actually went to closed status, of course. But what I'm seeing is even here, right, where we're seeing a property in, this would be the Niagara Association of Realtors. If I'm getting the name right, yeah, Niagara Association of Realtors. Okay. But what happened here, the way that I specifically ran this, because I knew 55 Burness and ran the search. So something specific, when you know something specific about the particular listing or about the particular property, the search widget is going to be one of the best places where you can just kind of hone in and get right in on that one. Maybe something to note as well, okay, when it comes to this and this goes to any search that you're going to run, on Matrix, they are not case sensitive. Okay, and what I mean by that is you might have noticed when I searched for Burness, the results that came in were like all capital letters. Well, that's not going to make a difference, right? Even if it was kind of really oddly spelt in such a way, this will still give me the same results. The capital letters, the lowercase letters, they're not going to affect your search. I still get my 6 results. Okay. Now, remembering how vast that data and that information is, the next thing that's going to be important is, well, is just the street number and the street name enough to give me what I'm looking for? What if I was looking for something like 100 King Street? Right? I don't even need to put a capital here, but just kind of happened by habit, but 100 King. Now, this becomes really specific, right? I mean, I would expect that out of the 21 associations that we share information with, there are probably a whole bunch of cities that have a King Street. It's a pretty common street name where Burness was quite unique. So if I run this search, I'll probably run into something a little bit different, right? It's not just one particular property, right? I'm noticing things like the city here being Stony Creek, Waterloo, Harrison, Guelph, Lindsay. It's just all over the map, right? So I might refine this one just a little bit more. If I was looking for specifically 100 King in Hamilton. Well, now I'm starting to add a little bit more in, right? If it has a specific unit number, right? But if I know the information of the property, search widget is going to be the spot where you track it down. Even if I do this one, we went down to kind of 12 different results. It's kind of one that I just made up. So, but as you can see, right, when you know information about the property, even if it is perhaps the MLS number, if you've got that, really, really good spot starting out with your search widget. Now that we've run a couple of searches, just a little bit of a start, right? So I mean, usually if I was hopping into Matrix for the very first time, probably something by default, maybe I'll look up like my childhood home or something like that. I think that's one of the defaults that most people kind of go for if you did grow up in one of the cities, or maybe your first house in Ontario, that kind of thing. Be a good thing to kind of hop in and check out, see that listing, see if there's some history of it available on the system itself. Next up though, I want to show you a really important tool that you're going to use in the searches, and it's called the wildcard feature. So what if the specific word I'm looking for is not so easy to spell, or what if I want to open up the search a little bit? So let's approach this, this wildcard, and how it works. Okay, we're going to approach it inside of the roster search. Show you here that you can find any of your colleagues and all of the members of these boards and associations, other salespeople, other colleagues of yours, right? You can find them through this roster search. If I open this up, right, you can see I'm in a member search right now. Provides me with a way that I can look up perhaps other agents that may perhaps be cooperating agents on a certain deal, and I might be trying to find a little bit more information so I can report a sale properly, or whatever the case may be. Maybe I'm just trying to find them in the system because I'm looking for their public-facing contact information. Well, one way that you can do that, right? Maybe I don't know their member ID off by heart, and perhaps in this case, right, let's say we're even using my last name as a way to find it. Well, maybe I remember that the name kind of started with something like maybe GARA, but I just can't remember how the name finishes. That's where your wildcard feature comes in. It just really opens up the search. Whenever you're searching on Matrix, it's pretty rigid. What I mean by rigid is like you have to spell things kind of perfectly, or else Matrix is just like, nope, there's no results. It'll just give you a big whopping 0 usually, unless you spell it perfectly. It's really, really different than, you know, searching on Google that will give you like, hey, did you mean Eric Garand, or did you mean, you know, King Street Hamilton type of thing. If you type Hamilton wrong, it'll just be like, there's no city called Hamilton, I don't know. It'll just give you no results. So if we put in this wildcard feature, it's going to open it up. I can see that even now there's 7 matches. And what we've done is this little asterisk. So I just went on my keyboard Shift-8 to get that little asterisk. And I'm saying to the system, the start of this last name specifically has to be GARA. However, any letters can follow. And if we go look at the matches, or we could just run the search, we'll see what we ended up with. So we have last names, GARAD, Garami, Garand, Garang, Garasto. You can start to see what that wildcard is in fact doing, right? We had to have the GARA at the start, and we did get, even though there was 7, right? We can pretty quickly track down the particular individual we were looking for. We can see that that's my OMID. And when you make your way through, you could see all that public facing information. The profile picture we set up, right? The information from the board website that's kind of sharing through here. You could see association staff, email address, all that type of stuff. So however it's set up, and you can search this even when you're searching for yourself as well, right? Maybe I'm searching for a cooperating agent whose name is a little bit difficult to spell, and this wildcard just kind of opens up the search to make it a little bit easier for me to track down this information that I need access to right now. Okay, so keep that one in mind. The wildcard feature here, being the asterisk, just kind of replaces a portion of the word. If I hover, this might be really hard to see on anyone joining us on a smartphone, and I do apologize, but I'm going to read this little pop-up message. So the third line says, if the full name is not known or the spelling is unclear, use the asterisk as a wildcard to replace the missing information. And that's exactly what we did. We just kind of typed in portion of the name, threw in the asterisk, and it made up kind of a whole bunch of results that kind of finished with a different section here. Okay, we're going to talk more of the wildcard feature when we get into the search as well. So we'll see kind of other ways that we can combine and make use of it. But just to introduce it here, right? Notice you absolutely have a roster search. You can find your colleagues, other cooperating agents, all that type of stuff. Okay. Tell you the truth, when a member calls me and they're asking for like help on their account, one of the first things I do is pretty much just ask for the OMID and pop it in here type of thing. Then I get a little bit more familiar with who it is that I'm having a chat with, but you're able to find all of your colleagues through this roster search feature. Next up, we're going to transition into the more the bread and butter of the searches that you'll be approaching from the search dropdown. right? The main one that we're probably going to use most often is going to come from the search dropdown, and just about all the options here are extremely similar. It's going to give you, we're going to land on a criteria screen. All the little criteria pieces that make up a listing, we're trying to refine and track down the specific ones that our clients are interested in. We're going to go into the residential one, just probably the most commonly used one here, but all the other ones are extremely similar to that. They all have the kind of the same information. So let's click on residential. I can see now that we are under a residential search. It shows the title at the top. Let's get a little bit familiar with kind of the layout here before we start making some selections. So something really, really important to notice is the tab that we're currently on. So when I clicked on search residential, straight away I landed on this tab called criteria. Notice right here that I have 3 different tabs that I can move in between, and anytime that I'm running a search, I am pretty much going in between each of these one at a time as I continue, to compare the matches that I have. I go to my criteria, make a quick change, have a look at the matches. Maybe I go to my map, make another change, have a look at my matches, go over to results to see the more specific ones that I have. So at all times, right, as you're working through these screens, you're probably going to be working across these 3 different tabs, using certain features on them to help you get to the results you're looking for. So just bear that in mind as far as the direction. I'm going to break this up into kind of 3 different columns as we talk about the things on this screen. And you're going to get more familiar with, the location where everything is, right? It might feel like a little bit overwhelming at first here. There's a lot of different options and boxes on this screen, but just kind of break it down into something that works for you though. So if we look at this left side, right? Everything to the left of this line perhaps, well, we can see that it has to do with things like the status type, the property subtype. Okay, so all of these, if I was to give them a category, maybe it's just like the specific overall feel for the listing. What sort of status, what sort of common interest does it have? So really overall features of a listing. You can see them from the left. In the middle here, we can see it's pretty heavily set up with regards to location. So things that are based on the area. Are we going to grab that from a specific address? Is it going to come from a specific kind of radius on the map? Or are we instead going to use maybe something like the city, or follow it up with like a really specific refined area such as a neighborhood? So center of the screen, a lot to do with the actual location itself. Okay, so we had kind of property features on the left, location in the middle. Okay, one spot that I do want to show you though is right at the bottom, not to be overlooked. We're going to come back and talk about this area where you can perhaps make some really clever searches inside of the remarks section. So things like the public or private remarks. So just at the bottom of the location, kind of center to the page, you can remember that remarks are at the bottom. And then when we get to this right-hand side, well, the whole right-hand side is where you get really, really specific about a feature. Something very peculiar, like a number of bedrooms, or the type of parking or garage structure, or whatever might be going on there. Okay, so if we were to split those up from kind of left to right, okay, we have like overall feel for the type of property, the location of the property in the middle, and then really, really specific features on the right. So if that kind of helps you break it down, right? Again, you're going to get much more familiar with this screen as you kind of work through, but just to give them a little bit of a title, so we have somewhere to store that information, I'd say that's a good way to break them down. Let's go ahead and start with the center of the screen down in that remarks section, because that really important part that I want to talk about first is, well, how can we be effective and make use of that wildcard feature? And a really good spot for that is in your remarks. Okay, and the reason why I want to bring this one into this section is so that you could see, as far as when you picture, right, the public remarks or even the private remarks on any listing is most likely going to be structured in kind of full sentences, right? It's going to be something like, spacious in-law suite attached, or in-law suite above area, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so I did use a pretty short phrase here, but what I want to show you is maybe we're looking for a keyword inside of this big paragraph that makes up the public remarks. Now, I chose in-law in this case because it just seems to be kind of something that's popping up more and more in kind of the Oakville area, so I thought I'd talk about that one. What you'll notice is if I type in something like this, right, I can see like apparently none of the, so I'm not very good at kind of making up with making up a sentence here because there are no matches. But what you can do to open up the search is just what we saw before, right? That asterisk feature. If we kind of put these on either side of the word, and what we're trying to do right at this time is, well, anything that might come before the word that we're using, that'll be accounted for with this front asterisk, and anything that might follow after, get rid of that too. Now we're actually going to get some matches. Now we have a keyword, and we're telling the system anything can come before, anything can come following, right? There's probably going to be a space following and then another word and complete the sentence, right? So if you put the asterisks on either side, you start to actually get matches. Now I have 558 that specifically speak of an in-law suite in one way or another. Okay. What you're going to see is if I did this the other way, however, you need to have the asterisks, and the reason being it's probably inside of a paragraph. No one's public remarks will be 100% just this word. So you just kind of open up the search a bit. We have 558 at this particular time. Now, the thing with making use of this strategy, okay, again, it's just one of your strategies. Remember, you're going to have a whole bunch of different ways that you approach searches. You get down to the ones that your client in the end is looking for. Something to make note of, especially for the public remarks, is in the end, technically, the listing agent, whether you like it or not, they may have spelt it incorrectly. So maybe just in case, we might account for that. Okay, for example, if I was to do in-law, like I know that's not how you spell it, but apparently there's 83 of them tucked away in there where the hyphen is missing. Okay, and if I was to, instead of the hyphen, right, maybe I'm thinking outside the box a little bit just to account for, in case they did this and they put in-law, and instead of the in-law suite, right, with the hyphen, we have this one. So we can see there's a whole bunch of matches that might be missing. Well, something that you can do is when you are working with this type of space, you can combine your different entries. And what you do is you just separate it with a comma and a space. So what I may do in this case is if I go in-law the incorrect way, when I do the comma space, it lets me do a brand new entry. Okay, now I'm doing in-law this way. And the final way, the correct way. Now I do all of these together, and rather than just having 558, I now have 723 available in the system. Okay, so something that I may do, of course, is right, I start with this as a bit of a base, right? Maybe I'm going to do one more here, I forgot. Sometimes it's called a nanny suite. Does that help? Okay, it only gives us like 24 more matches or so. But in the end, right, these combinations of keywords that we used and we kind of block them off into different wildcard features. Well, now we have 757. That's our base. And now we're going to specify the city, the type of status, the price range, how many bedrooms, right? Whatever the case may be. And perhaps I do end up finding one that my client's looking for in the particular area, right? But it starts with this little bit of a base. So always kind of make note of that, right? Sometimes this might be a really good approach. It begs the kind of question that I have to be a little bit specific. I got to think a little bit outside the box because of, at the end of the day, listing agents might write it a certain way. But I've heard like members have kind of reached out and said, hey, you know, I've used this before. I was looking for things that might be like on a ravine. I've had people mention that they search this way when they're looking for estate sales or something that is the estate of, or forgetting keywords here for those, but yeah, you get the point, right? So really specific things that maybe there isn't a box that's called Go Station, yes or no, right? But maybe I can search Go Transit, or I can search specific keywords that are commonly in the remarks from time to time, and you can kind of use that as a bit of a base. Okay. The other thing I noticed while I was working on that portion as well, okay, and I'll just talk about that one next, is, well, think about these categories. Okay, the way that these categories came to be is that, in fact, they're the ones that are used when you input a listing. So sometimes one of the kind of best strategies here, and I know it's just kind of taking in one thing at a time, but the way that a listing is inputted in the first place on an MLS system has to do with the fields that you select and that you enter on a property information sheet, like an info data sheet, right? When you're on an info data sheet, you have to choose whether there's a garage or not. And that's why this specific title is here, or this type of selection is available. You have to enter rooms, it's mandatory. You have to choose a price. That's where these fields are coming from. So because the listing agent must include a price, you can refine searches based on price. Always think of it in kind of that direction. It all comes from the things that a listing agent would have put on the listing. And as a result, if it happens that you have a feature here that is available on an info data sheet, however, maybe it's not available on the main screen, what you can do is perhaps you can add it in under additional fields. So this is right at the bottom of your criteria screen. You'll notice I have a couple here because at some point it seems like a member must have called me on the phone and we were talking about something like, I think in this case, the member that called was like, Eric, help, how do I get only properties that have a walkout basement? We had a whole conversation about it, but let me get rid of these really quick, and then we'll get our heads around that one. So what you do is, let me just remove these first to make it look more like what yours would look like if you're coming here for the first time. So when I go to the bottom, you'll notice there aren't any additional fields by default, okay? But you can add them in if you would like, okay? I would just really caution you to be careful with these, however, okay? If I make a selection here, one that came up a couple weeks ago, I'll just use this one, okay? So a selection that someone was really keen on using was, they're saying, Eric, how do I find properties on a ravine? Which is so specific. So this is where I want to be really cautious. And what ended up happening is after I looked at the property information sheet, well, the spot where the ravine actually shows up, right? I wouldn't type in ravine. It's going to give me nothing. What I'm looking for is the feature that includes all of those types. And in this case, it's called feature area influences. It has a really weird name, but if I go something like influences, even just INFL in this little search, right, the available field will show up. Feature area influences, if I add this one on, right, this is what it's called on an info data sheet. Then I go back, and if I make my way down to the bottom now after adding that one in, I should be able to see the field titled feature area influences. And at the bottom, kind of alphabetically here, ravine is one of the options. So the reason why I'm saying in this additional section to be really, really cautious when you make use of this, the reason for that is because when you're adding a new field, there's a very good chance that that is just an optional field. The mandatory fields are up here already, right? It's a very high chance that the field that you're refining with up here is a mandatory field on an info data sheet where perhaps whether I select that there is a ravine or not, that's optional. It's just a feature, it's just an area influence. I have to choose one specific area influence, but maybe the one I chose was that there's a golf course nearby, right? It doesn't specifically mean that I chose there's a ravine. There is a ravine, I probably did make the selection. I could see 303 matches in the system that have a ravine selected, but just really important to use caution because it's optional. Okay, things that you add in, perhaps they're optional. okay? But you can add in a whole range of different things that, again, end up just being one of the strategies, right? Perhaps I'm gonna, I'll get rid of this ravine thing. You can see I got all my open matches right now. Maybe I'm gonna do ravine in some aspect in the public remarks and look through the ones that have ravine. I have 176 through here. I then do my ravines as a second strategy through here and look at these matches, refine them in a whole different way, right? All these are different approaches to how you would kind of work it in, but just be aware, right? You do have an add remove. You can add additional criteria, features, columns, things that might help out, okay? You know what? I'm probably going to get rid of this. I don't think I'll be using it, but just to give you an example there, someone that contacted me on one. Okay, there we go. I think it's gone. Perfect. All right, next up. So now we have like just a little bit of a familiarity with this screen, right? I mean, the whole idea here, right? When we are approaching this particular screen, perhaps we are looking for something that's an active property. We want to refine it a little bit further. So it's only houses, and now we're hiding the condo units and all that type of stuff. Perhaps we're trying to get to a certain area really quickly and we just type in something like Oakville. Well, we're always keeping an eye on our matches to see how those things are changing and kind of affecting the number of matches that we have. Okay, it's all going to kind of be a part of the approach. So I'll just show you like this one really quick, right? I'm already down to 381. Maybe I go to my map at this point and I start having a look at the actual pins that are available, right? Now that I've selected an area, 381 is probably a lot easier to work from than the 5,000 plus that were available before. And we end up kind of working from here, trying to decide maybe visually there's a better way that I can kind of refine the ones that I'm looking for. Perhaps I go into my results next. You're always going to see me moving in between these three tabs. It's really important to get comfortable navigating in between these and always keeping an eye on your matches as you work throughout. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a lot more. I'm just going to refresh the page really quick though. I want to get to those kind of open matches that we had. I'm just going to go to the dashboard, click once again on search residential. So we could start from just that kind of clean default with the 5,000 plus matches. A couple of things I want to show you here. So first thing, remembering, right? We were talking about how much data we actually have access to, and by default, the statuses that are just kind of selected for me right now are active and conditional. I would expect that if I went to the map right now, it would have to do with every active and conditional property on this entire list of associations. So when I do that, it's where you can get a really good visual of that. I click on the map, I'll notice that, and apologies here, with the way that I'm zoomed in, the map might be just like a really skinny rectangle here, so sorry about that, but you try and, right, what you would notice is that these 5,000 plus listings, as you kind of look around the areas of the map, you can see they kind of group up into certain sections, right? So you could see a grouping for Kingston here, perhaps a grouping for like Peterborough, Barrie. As you start to zoom in, the regions kind of make their way more condensed. You could see Kitchener. Perhaps I can hover like the Waterloo versus the Kitchener ones. Sometimes if you go close enough, it's just going to turn into those green pins, right? So you can already get a visual for kind of the way that these regions are kind of grouped and kind of broken down here. You can see Hamilton, kind of the Niagara Association of Realtors here. So a whole bunch out of the list. Okay, always remembering that like when we are refining the information, it's a lot of information. It's a wide geography, a whole wide area that we're kind of covering. So one way that we might approach it is by using the map itself, right? Rather than on my criteria screen by using the region, the municipality, perhaps I am actually drawing on the map. That's usually the option that I lean to tell you the truth. Whenever, you know, a member or a client or someone is asking me to find a specific set of properties in an area, I'm more likely to use the map to set up that area. So let's start to look at the tools that we would use for that. They're all towards the top of the screen here, starting with INRIX all the way over to this recenter button. Well, what we can see is some of them right here, right? These 3, 4 drawing tools that we have, like a draw radius, rectangle, polygon, or freehand polygon. Well, we can pretty quickly get an idea for what they do just by making a selection here. So if I was to draw like a radius here, kind of made the selection, just kind of dragged it in and drew a little bit of a circle here. Okay, so there aren't going to be any pins on the water, but I've kind of grabbed an area near the lake here, and I have a whole bunch of pins now that are available in this section. Looks like I even grabbed 348 of them just in that area that hit part of the radius. Right, if I was to draw maybe a rectangle, I know I'm zoomed out pretty far right now, so it's a pretty large area that I'm making selection of. But just to get familiar with the way that the tool works, right? Draw a polygon. Maybe it's just, you know, a random shape that we're doing. We can see in this case, we ended up with 132, I guess, that were in that particular spot. Okay, so get familiar with these different drawing tools. If I wanted to clear all the shapes at once, well, pretty specifically, I have like a little bit of an eraser here. If you ever want to manipulate one of the drawings that you have on the screen though, just notice you can hover the red dot that corresponds. So if I wanted to get rid of that Milton one, perhaps instead I wanted to, you know, maybe that wasn't the shape I was looking for and I wanted to delete the shape, you can just kind of individually delete that one. If I had some shapes that were perhaps overlapping for any reason, right? If my client told me for one reason or another, this particular section in the center, well, they actually wanted to exclude that portion. Okay, we have kind of everything around it. This kind of we've excluded. The ones we've included are inside the larger circle. Okay, so you can kind of just manipulate all that. Something that I do want to show you really, really quickly though, and I think what I'm going to do first is we're working with like a whole bunch of matches. You can see like my map might be a little bit slow. It's trying to load all of these different listings. Just temporarily, what I might do sometimes is I might draw like out into the water. So listings can only exist inside of your drawing. So I might have I purposefully here just made it so that it just cleared out all the noise. Now there's no listings on my map. I can go ahead and just delete this later on when I'm ready. But something to show you really quick here is right next to that clear all shapes, a really, really important tool that you have on the map is called layers. When I click on layers, it's like 3 pieces of paper on top of each other kind of thing. It gives you overlays that you could put on top of the map, and perhaps that helps you with the geography or helps you kind of draw a section that your client's looking for. So if I went to layers and then activated neighborhood, maybe I'm not familiar with the neighborhoods in Guelph or the neighborhoods in Cambridge. Maybe I'm new to Oakville and I don't even know those neighborhoods. That kind of sounds like me actually. And I go ahead and select neighborhood. Well, perhaps I can kind of zoom in and what happens is I can see the boundaries for all of the neighborhoods. Okay, I can see even kind of Hamilton, Niagara. I can see a whole bunch of the geography has been mapped here. And perhaps this really, really does help out when I'm looking for a particular property, right? Maybe my client told me, hey, you know, I'm looking for a property, maybe stretching from, you know, Chartwell over to 4th Line and kind of across the different neighborhoods here. And maybe rather than I'm saying the streets here, maybe I don't need the overlay for that. But if my client was saying, hey, I want to be, you know, I really like the properties in Old Oakville, Central Oakville. If we zoom in a bit, we'll see Central Oakville, and maybe a couple of the other neighborhoods that are a little bit southeast of that. Things like Southwest Oakville and West Oakville, since I don't know them off by heart. Right, well, putting this overlay on the map, perhaps I can now choose my polygon tool. It helps me provide a little bit of a base for what we're looking for here. I think Chartwell was over here, if I'm not mistaken. Am I looking at the wrong one? 4th Line, Chartwell's the other side. Right, and it can kind of help you a little bit with your drawing. I know I'm completely butchering it by going too quickly here. But if I was to follow this along, right, give or take, I did end up with 3 or 4 of those particular neighborhoods, right? Just a little bit of a peek into those West Oakville and Southwest Oakville here. But if I was to get rid of the neighborhood layer afterwards, what I'm left with is the drawing of that particular area. And where the listing agent has pinned the particular property, well, I've accounted for that within my drawing. Okay, so it's going to be a really, really, really good approach for how you can have a look at these listings. Right? I've got 105 listings that perhaps our client was just saying, hey, like they had a little bit of interest in these different properties or these different sections geographically. We drew on the map as best we could to kind of include those listings. And now that we have the potential ones from this base, now's the time that we're going to start to refine it, right? I've got 105. There's probably a whole bunch south of Lakeshore that are way out of kind of the price range that we're working in. I mean, hopefully I have someone that can buy this one, but probably not. And we're looking to refine it a bit. So maybe our client told us, hey, the price range that they're looking for is more in the $1 to $1.4 million range. Well, we go back to our criteria tab. Perhaps we enter that price range, and we went down straight from 105 down to even 20 matches just with this one change. Just accounting for the extra zeros here since we have this checked off. And if we went to our map, right, we would just kind of have another look at that. Oh yeah, we can get rid of our temporary rectangle there out in the water. We don't need that anymore. Okay, here's our 20 different properties. Okay, we can see understandably a good part of them would be more kind of west here. Back to criteria. Maybe the next thing that our client mentioned to us was that they were in fact looking for a house. Probably likely that there's a good amount of houses in here, so I don't think I'm gonna cut out too many, right? When we had the 105, if we went and clicked house before doing our price, it probably would have got cut into like half or so. But in that price range, I think they mostly are houses, as you can see. Maybe it's just active. I don't know if I saw any conditional ones on there actually. Oh, looks like there was one maybe tucked underneath a pin somewhere. But just like that, right? We're kind of approaching it one thing at a time. Every time we make a selection, we compare it, we come back, we have a look at what we're left with, right? We can make our way in between the different tabs. That's really the important part that I want you to take from these approaches. What I mean by that is whenever I get maybe a little bit newer member that's using ITSORealEstate and they call me on the phone and they say, Eric, help. I keep trying to find properties for my clients, but it always gives me 0 matches. And then we have a little bit of a chat. We talk about kind of the approach that they're taking. Okay, walk me through how it is that you're doing your search. And just before you know it, like it just happens that they're starting to tell me that they have like legitimately 20 different things on the screen. Like I'm selecting everything I can because I kid you not, sometimes this does happen. I just have someone on the phone that's like, yeah, and I did this and this and this, and then by the time we're at like 6 or 7 selections, it's like, whoa, slow down. That's too much. Like, yeah, you're probably going to be at 0 matches pretty quick. So as you saw, like the approach that I was going with was totally opposite to that. Like make a couple of selections that you're comfortable with, compare it to the number of matches you have. You're probably going to go in between the map, come back to criteria. You're going to keep a really good eye on the number of matches you're working from. Because if you hit 0 because you selected like 20 different things, you know, that's not a really effective way to approach the search in general. Okay. Something I could show you really, really quick as well. Like we selected way too many. Like that was an over exaggeration. Hopefully no one is kind of approaching the criteria screen in that way. That's just too many different things. But if ever you find yourself in a spot where you did hit 0 matches and you're not sure why, a really, really good place where you can get a summary of your criteria screen, much like I've done here, right? When I look at the criteria screen, there is so much going on here, right? It could be a bit overwhelming. If you want to kind of summarize that though, there is a section where it's all broken down and it's on your results screen. So when I click on results, right, I have no listing because I just went out of control. There normally would be a table here that shows the information. But below your results screen, you always have a summary of your criteria, which might be a much easier way to visualize the selections you have made. Like finding out that partially winterized was something that I accidentally, or something that I selected. Right? Looking at this screen might be a really easy way that I could be like, hey, oh, I don't think I meant to select partially winterized. So when I go back to criteria, I can kind of look through the screen until I find the section that refers to things that are winterized, and I just uncheck that one. Maybe it kind of like frees up my search a bit. Right? Ours is still just out of control, so I'm gonna have to like deselect a few things here. Maybe we'll start getting some listings now. Yeah, there we go. So I deselected about 5 of them on the screen. If we went to results, now we would see we actually have 18. Here's the list of them. And now we can see it much better, right? We have residential, active conditional, house, detached, latitude, longitude. This one is referring to that little drawing that we made on the map. So just remembering, right? We used our layers icon. We kind of drew a bit of a shape. This lat long is it's referring to the drawing. And we have our price, 1 to 1.4. And the other info doesn't have to do with, let's see, we have 6 pieces of criteria that we have specifically selected in this case. Right? And we can keep an eye on those matches as we make any kind of changes here. There we go. Now we have 1, 2, 3 plus our map. Right, we'll probably have about 4 or so that gives us these 17. We can always go to our results to get a closer look at those 17 listings. Okay, we're going to talk about kind of even more different approaches here. Want to bring us back to our map though, because we covered all the drawing tools up to layers. The very last one that I hadn't mentioned just yet was INRIX drive time. So I'll just spend a couple of moments here just talking about that tool. It's a bit more of an interactive drawing tool. Okay, so it's really similar to like how you draw a radius. However, what it does is it's actually going to take into account Google Analytics and driving patterns for what you end up inputting in here. Okay, if I was to click on INRIX drive time, let's use an example, right? Our current main office location for OMDREB is 125 Navy Street. So what if I'm saying that that's my morning commute, perhaps, right? 125 Navy Street, Oakville. I'll just have it kind of zoom in on that. I hit enter for it to kind of confirm. So we've got 125 Navy, Oakville. Perhaps I'll be driving to here, not currently in lockdown or anything like that, but if I'm driving to here, the office opens at 8:30. Maybe I want to be there for 8:15. And I want my maximum commute to be, let's say, 20 minutes on any given kind of Monday, let's say, and click add. Well, what it's going to do is it's going to use kind of driving patterns for that particular time of day. It's going to do a little bit of like a reverse Google Map search, and it's going to give me a drawing, a shape on the map, trying to tell me that like if I lived out in this corner of this Erin Mills area, well, if I was trying to get to work for 8:15 in our current environment with current driving patterns at that particular time, let's say I left at about 7:50 or 7:55, well, I'd pretty much get to work here. Where does work end up being? It's right down here, this particular dot. Well, I can expect to get to work by that 8:15 timeline that I've set up. Okay, you're going to notice, however, the drawing's actually kind of large. If I ran this search, I'm going to say a long period of time. If I ran this search 2 years ago, before lockdown and everything kind of happened, well, the drawing was probably much smaller. It was probably, out here is kind of the furthest I can get, just with it, Google Maps accounting for having fewer cars on the road at that particular time. I am ended up with a pretty large drawing, right? Realistically, pre-2019, I don't think I would have gotten all the way from Erin Mills to work. It's probably going to take me like a half hour or maybe even more to get there for the 8:15 timeline. But you can see it kind of takes into account driving patterns and things like that to give you your drawing. So it could be like a really interactive way that you involve your client in the search. If they're, if your client is just unsure about the exact area they're looking for, but if they have like a particular career and a commute to work, you kind of work that in and kind of work them into, hey, well, maybe this would be, if we're going to do like a 20-minute commute, and you kind of work it into their workplace and stuff like that. Kind of a creative way that you can approach the search as well. So I'll delete that shape though. Right, something that you could do is if it's like two individuals that are going to be living together, you run both of their commute. Maybe they're commuting to different cities even, and how those INRICS drive times overlap ends up being the section where you're going to suggest they end up searching for houses in, right? And one's going to Milton, one's going to Oak. I mean, by default, right, we probably expect that, hey, we're going to just focus on this area here in between the two cities. But the INRICS might give you like a really interactive way to come up with the neighborhoods that overlap for both commutes. Something like that. So we did INRICS, we did all these drawing tools that clear all shapes. Looks like we're pretty good, right? Recenter is just going to bring me back to a certain area. So we're pretty familiar with how to approach the map with these different tools. Again, remembering this neighborhood tab is pretty significant. When we think about the neighborhoods for a particular area, these are the neighborhoods that you're following when you're going to input a listing, right? Later on down the road, when you go and you have the property information sheet ready and you're ready to put that listing and pin it in a really specific spot, well, you're going to choose these neighborhoods, and using the layers icon might help you get that correctly all the time, okay? Like the thing is, at the end of the day, right, even though I could see that West Oak Trails is in this section and it happens to line up pretty well with this background map of Google, at the end of the day, the neighborhoods are set up, and the boundaries for the neighborhoods, they were set up by the particular board that governs them. Okay, so it's not based on like a Canada postal code mapping. It's not based on the way Google's done it. Those things might all look different. So technically, your client's idea of Westmount might be a little bit different than the exact boundaries of the Westmount neighborhood. Bear that in mind. Keep that theme kind of there, but using the boundary and using your layers icon in your neighborhood layer is really, really going to help out when you're working on the map using this geography, right? Whenever a client, calls me up, they're like, hey, I'm listing a property in Cambridge. I'm really, really not sure what neighborhood it lands in. You can see all this stuff going on here, and I can tell that this boundary here is specific to Forest Hill. So using your layer icon is really going to help you out with that. Let's deactivate that here. Get back to where we're working. Okay, perfect. Very next section we're going to talk about is the whole idea of customizing listing displays. Okay, that happens on your results screen, and it is so important. Okay, a lot of different topics to talk about. So many different things come into a particular search. So I'm trying to just articulate all these different angles that you're going to be looking at. And what happens on this screen? Okay, this is so significant. Okay, and what I'm talking about when I say customizing the listing display, well, this whole screen here that's giving me a breakdown of the MLS number, the status, the price, right? The neighborhood, the address, all that stuff. Much like how my dashboard can be all moved around and I can change the way the widgets look, you need to make changes to this list so that it's more efficient for yourself. Mine really should look different than yours. And I haven't changed very much about mine, but every single individual should have probably a different looking listing display here. Okay, and what I mean by that is these titles, they can all be moved around. See how I have neighborhood here? Well, like I can just grab neighborhood and I can put it all the way on the left if I want. I can move the MLS number one. I can change the way I can completely change the way this looks. Okay, what I'm going to do right now though, because I've made so much quick stuff been swapped around on mine, I'm going to reset it to the system default so that mine looks like perhaps some of yours if you haven't changed anything just yet. So this little gear here is where you're going to go. If I click on that and I click reset to the system search defaults, well, what you'll see will happen if I click on that is it's going to go to the default that you would have if you've never changed anything on this list, which is the default being kind of some icons towards the left, listed with MLS number, status, current price, kind of in this order where I could see the address, the city, the bedrooms, and all this stuff towards the right-hand side as well. Okay, that's the default. Now, the default is maybe not the most efficient way to view 17 different listings at once. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? What if I needed to know the commencement date? Or perhaps I'm looking down the road, I'm looking at setting up a CMA and I need all of the close days, the close prices, a whole bunch of extra information. Well, that means I have to bring in new columns to help me with that. Okay, so how you do that is just like how you saw, pardon me, I just have to cough here. Pardon me. So the same way that you saw me grabbing one of these titles and kind of dragging it around, how you do that, okay, is when you're moving your cursor, you can see I just have this like pointing arrow right now for my mouse, and when I make my way into the space that has a title, it switches to a 4-pointed arrow. When it's a 4-pointed arrow, I can drag and drop things, right? I can just kind of go into the address feature, grab it, and kind of move it around a bit. Well, if you're, instead of moving one and dragging it to a different spot, if I'm looking to insert a column, how you would do that is rather than dragging and dropping, if I just click and let go, it gives me some menu options here. And there's one called Insert Column. So I'll hit cancel here just to show you one more quick time here. If I go to subtype, I'm not going to click on the blue title, which gives me like a finger pointer. I'm going to click when it's a move, like a 4-pointed arrow. It's easy to do inside of the address field because there's a huge gray space back here. If I click on this, if I just click and let go, it gives me the insert column feature. And this gives me all of the different things, like hundreds of different things that I can add in if I'd like. Well, I'm probably just going to search by keyword here. So I'm going to look for one called the neighborhood field, right? NEI, just specify neighborhood. I have to select it so it's highlighted and then click apply. And now all of a sudden I have an extra column. It's going to help me keep an eye on things. Not only do I have the address and the city, but now I also can see the neighborhood that was specifically chosen, right? Like Central Oakville, Old Oakville, some Treb Bronte East, things like that. It's helping me kind of visualize part of what that drawing was that we ended up building here. Well, it accounted for like 4 or 5 different neighborhoods that maybe I wasn't thinking of at first. Okay, so we've got neighborhood. If I want another one, right, I can click insert column. Maybe what I want is perhaps commencement date. Oh, maybe I'll just type in date. Gives me the whole list of different date types. I can go to commencement date, bring that one in. So now we can maybe do current price over here, and we can see how long it's been perhaps on the market, or just at a glance here from the commencement date for this particular listing, right? We have some all the way back from April, perhaps, right? This first one's been up since the 27th of April. So we've got current price, commencement date, the address, neighborhood, right? Starting to kind of come together a little bit. Maybe I'm gonna have, like, by the end of it, I'll have 3 different price types, things like current price, close price, maybe sold price, whatever the case may be for what I'm looking for. But you're going to customize these displays to be a lot more efficient, right? Nothing is going to be worse than me going into all 17 of these individually just to find out that this one's commencement date, by going all the way down here and looking at the kind of the list dates or whatever the case, and then making my way back, looking at the next one, finding my list date and the brokerage information being the 26th of May, and then going all the way back, right? No ways am I going to be doing that for all 17 listings. Maybe I can just get a glance by putting in a new column. It's gonna be really, really important, okay? Maybe something that helps too, right? From this right-hand side, I might notice that there is something called days on market. Maybe I just grab that one because I like DOM instead of the commencement date. Okay, and perhaps, or even if I'm comparing the two, perhaps, right, we could see this one's been 35 days on the market, which was that kind of 27th of April up to today's date kind of thing. However you want to kind of visualize that. But now we've made a few changes, some quick changes to what we have here. Something really, really important is going to follow now that we've customized our listing display. And that's the fact that the next time that I run a residential search, I'm going to want this layout to be the one that I'm looking at. So how you save this new layout is actually by going back into this gear icon and clicking on this top option. I can always go back to the system search defaults by just clicking on this one here. But if I'm looking to save a new one, the new one that we've changed here, you have to go in and click on this option here. I'm going to read it out. It is a little bit of a mouthful here, but it is. It says set current display, sort order, end count per page as my search starting default. So if I click on this huge sentence, I get a pop-up, your search defaults have been set. Now that confirmation that if I leave this screen and I'm just totally out of here and I run a brand new residential search and I go into the results, it should have things that we notice here like our days on market and our neighborhood that maybe we didn't have last time, right? We can see that we have even Smithville here. We have like a whole bunch of like Greater Napanee, like these neighborhoods are right here because we added in that column on our custom listing display. And every time we come in for a residential search, this will be our new base that we're working from. We can delete some of them, insert some new ones, and whenever, just remembering to set it as the new starting default if we ever want it to kind of carry through for the next search. Okay, really, really important there. All right, I'm going to go back to the dashboard, refresh everything. So quite a few different features that we've kind of worked on here together. What I'd like to do right now though, okay, because hey, we had a drawing on the map. We set up a price range, some specific criteria. We had 17 properties that our client was asking us to refine and find information on. What if I got a little bit out of control and I want to get back to where I was before? Okay. Well, first thing to always bear in mind is that when you're working on any of these tools, especially on Matrix, ITSORealEstate.ca, right? You want to always work in a forward direction. So I want to get back to those listings. I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to click a whole bunch of times on my back arrow until I find where I was 10 minutes ago. Instead, there's going to be a way that you can go in a forward direction. And what I mean by that is you do have a button here, not to be overlooked. You have something called recent searches. If I click on that, it'll give me the searches that I've been working on in my session here today. Okay, I can see all the way back to like over here, like about an hour ago when we were working on 55 Burness. Looks like it was the one that I typed in Burness with like a bunch of random capitalizations and got the 6 listings, right? Well, if we go here, we could see that at 2:34, so it was about 6 minutes ago, sorry, we had 17 particular listings. And when we click on that option, it's going to get us right back to where we were. So we still have our kind of our listing display here, which is nice. We have our 17 listings that we were working from. Okay, something that I want to show you really quickly here though is, well, first off, right, remembering our summary is right below here. So we could see that for us, there are 5 key pieces of information that we used to refine the thousands of listings across the 21 boards that share information. We refined it to residential, active, house, 1 to 1.4, and a drawing to make up our geography. 5 particular key pieces of information gave us 17 results when we ran it at 234. Okay. Perhaps what we're looking to do is maybe we were just kind of getting started with this information, kind of setting up for the client, right? We do probably have to refine this a bit more. There's some of these that are going to kind of, they're probably not going to be interested in based on features like bedrooms, bathrooms, things like that, square footage, whatever the case may be. We might refine that later on when we revisit it. But what I want to show you is that, well, you do have some certain action buttons or some saving features that you have here. So let's maybe talk about if we're saving this search and we're trying to, maybe we just want to run this search, 4 days from now or 5 days from now. This was just something we were setting up as a base. And we're going to use it a bit later on. Well, what we're going to do is make use of these buttons towards the bottom of the chart. The one we are in fact looking for, I keep leaning towards save, so let's maybe just hop in there. We'll talk about the save functions that you have, okay? So if I click on save, what we're looking to do today is just to save it as a saved search. Okay, of course you have features below here that are maybe a bit more interactive. On Thursday, we end up breaking down in great detail the auto email feature. If you're a dual member, I think ITSORealEstate might call this setting up kind of like prospects and stuff like that. But the auto email is like an automated way that you can bring in new listings so that they go to your client's portal. Okay, but at this time, we're just going to save this particular search. Ours at this time has 17 in it, but what we're actually saving when we're saving the search is we're saving this part. We're saving the bottom, the part that actually refined the MLS data. So if I click new saved search, it'll pop up this screen. Now we're saving the search. What do we want to name it? I don't know why this name came from, but it's just the name that came to mind. So properties for Chloe. Oh, geez, I don't even know how to spell Chloe. My goodness. Hopefully that's how you spell Chloe. I don't know where the name came from. It's the one that popped into my head. Properties for Chloe. Okay, and maybe it was even like a create a contact for it or assign it. You can see mine are just kind of tests with my own name as association staff here, of course. But right, you might create a contact. It's like more information about Chloe here. But as you can see, when I'm saving the search, what I am in fact saving is what got us to this point. How did we refine all of that, those thousands of listings? When you save a search, that's in fact what you're saving. Okay, these key pieces that refined all that data. And if I save this, should get a pop-up. Whoops, click too quickly there. Created a saved search, properties for Chloe. Okay, so what we would in fact end up doing here is, right, perhaps what we were trying to set up was later on down the road, right? Maybe 4 days from now, when after I have another conversation with Chloe and we refine it a little bit more on what they are in fact after, I can always go back, and now I can go into the My Matrix dropdown, which we were previously using for our settings menu. You can see there's a saved searches option here. I click on saved searches. Might have to just kind of track down. Mine are probably way out of order here, but let me see. I hope I didn't pass it. Properties for Joe, properties for Chloe. So here we are, the one that we created the 1st of June, properties for Chloe, right? We can kind of find out more information about it. We can always update the criteria, go and have a look at the results. Right? We run this search, we get the 17 that we were looking at, right? No new ones have hit the market, understandably, in the last like 10 minutes or so, but we could see those 17. And if we go to run this 4 days from now, we can always just get back to it really, really quickly here. Okay. Awesome. So what I would definitely suggest is, just like everything that we sort of approached even today when we were going into this search, right? Getting familiar with some other spots as well, right? Rather than using the regional breakdown or the breakdown of the city, we did opt for a little bit of kind of like a map search in our example. Okay, but definitely like think of an example, right? Maybe have a colleague or someone just give you like 5 lines that a client might tell you, right? Like, hey, find me a property. I really like some of the Milton neighborhoods that are so-and-so. My price range is 800 to 1.1 million. I like 3-bedroom properties that are houses, and find me a property that meets what I'm looking for, right? Just even that little bit of a case study that you could do with a colleague helps you get familiar. You can start to approach the search, get down to your results, save the search, things like that. I'd say is a really, really good thing to kind of work on. I know we looked at a few different angles, right? We started by breaking down the search widget when we know particular information. We went to a roster search to introduce our wildcard feature. And then we did go through quite a few features on the criteria screen, even adding to our wildcard feature when using the public remarks, and kind of working in our map and our results tab. So just getting familiar with moving in between all those different screens, really, really going to go a long way for when you are tracking down properties for clients, of course. So I'd highly suggest kind of going through that and practicing it when you have a second. The last thing that I did want to bring into play, since now we have like a way that we can approach the different searches and stuff like that. The last thought that I want to leave with you is just how do you customize one of your widgets, which is called your hot sheets. So hot sheets is just one way that maybe you keep an eye on the market or the area that you're currently working in, your particular trading area perhaps, right? If I want to keep an eye on the Oakville area or the Milton area for something really specific, well, hot sheets ends up being a really good way to do that. As you can see here, I have a time-based search that I could run. Maybe it's for the last 3 days. I set mine up already, and we're going to recreate this. Or it's perhaps new residential properties in Oakville. If I click on this one over a 3-day period, I can see that I ended up with, in this case, I ended up with 30 listings, and they're all in Oakville. So they're kind of all like new ones in Oakville over the last 3 days, perhaps. But how you end up creating that all has to do with how you customize your hot sheet. The hot sheet's not going to do anything for you unless you customize it and make it really, really specific for yourself. Okay, so let's have a look at that. How you approach it though, and the way that you customize anything has to do with criteria. So it's going to look very much like that residential search we were just running. Okay, you can see here inside of my hot sheets, and something to mention, right? Your hot sheets, 100% your titles are different than mine. So maybe we'll start by just, I'm going to restore the system defaults. So mine looks just like yours. There we go. So I reset the system defaults. Now we have just the placeholders, things like residential, cross property, all these random ones. I'm going to hit done. As you can see, if I've never customized anything about my hot sheets, well, they're not doing anything. If I click on residential, it's just doing like an open residential search for the last 3 days, like everything that's occurred, which is over 5,000 different things, because remembering we have a vast geography. It's not like I'm not just in the Oakville area. I've got Kingston here. I don't even know what Battersea is, right? Huge geography. So how you customize it for your trading area is going to be pretty important. If I click on customize, the reason why mine looked so different is because, well, first off, these are just placeholders. I don't know why there are so many. Like, they just made it so that it looks like this residential drop down, but they're not doing anything unless you refine them. So the reason why I only had a couple was because I usually start by just deleting these. They don't really serve a purpose. They're just placeholders. It's just kind of showing you that that is one of the options that you have. But I end up deleting every single one, because when it comes to a hot sheet, I'd rather just start from a blank slate. I'd rather create a brand new one, something that might apply to the area that I'm trading in. And when you have nothing to work from, you just have one button. It's the add button. If I add a brand new one, we are now adding a hot sheet. Right? I could choose residential if I'd like. Right? Maybe it's residential leases, and I end up doing all the residential leases in Oakville. That kind of thing. Right? That's a way that I'll keep an eye on the market. I'm going to throw you a curveball, actually. We're going to go cross property so I can actually introduce that feature. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go very similar to before. I'm just going to say, let's call it new properties. We're going to go with residential and multi-residential. So I could see that residential and multi-residential are separate categories. If I ever wanted to combine more than one property type, the way that you do that is by selecting cross property, and we'll see in a couple of moments why that is. So new residential and multi-residential in, let's go with Milton. I'm gonna hit save. We added a hot sheet. Now it's just a placeholder. It's just like that list that we had that weren't doing anything. Hot sheet's not gonna do anything until I actually edit this criteria, or else it's just doing an open search of the entire system. So I'm gonna click edit criteria. The title that I chose was a little bit specific, so it kind of gives us some indication of some of the things we might choose, like new listing. So I'm going to go with new. What you might notice here is that we have something called property type. This field here is unique to cross property. It is the way that you can combine more than one property type. Whenever you do a cross property, like I'm not going to click on this, I'm just going to hover search, and you can see there's a cross property option. What if I did want to look at farm and land at the exact same time? Well, I would go to search, cross property, and then when I get to this field, I can select both at once. That's how you search for more than one. Okay. It can only be done inside of cross property though. That's the one that gives you multiple property types. What we talked about though was residential and multi-residential. So I might make both selections. I've got new listings that are residential and multi-residential. And we know our locations in the center here. We said Milton, select that. Maybe that's enough criteria for now. I hit save, I hit done. And we've actually customized this hot sheet. If I click on it, on this title that we've made, it's going to give me the last 3 days, new properties that encompass residential and multi-residential, and it's specifically only the Milton area. There are 50 in the last 3 days. They're all Milton. Okay, so maybe this is a quick way that I keep an eye on the market, right? Hot sheet ends up becoming like a way that I can gauge the market, gauge changes in the market, things like that. If I hit customize, now that we kind of have some sort of an approach for it, you'll be able to see it's pretty quick, right? If I've already got this set up, I want to add a new one. I'm going to stick with cross property and go new resi, multi-resi in Oakville. If I could spell it, oh my goodness, there we go. Edit the criteria, new residential, multi-residential, Oakville, save. Hit done. Right, I'm going to end up creating a whole bunch of these. These are my residential, multi-residential. I'm probably going to have some new leases in Milton, new leases in Oakville. Maybe this time I'm going to change my time frame to 24 hours. And when I click on Oakville, I can see all the new ones that hit the market in the last 24 hours. There's 29 of them. These are all Oakville. And how the time-based search works, I could see here. Of course, whenever we're looking for a breakdown, we look below the results screen to our summary, where we could see change type history modification timestamp, May 31st from 2:54 p.m. onwards. That's how it created the 24-hour window, which gave us all 29 of these results. Okay, so really, really quickly here, right? It just happens to be almost 3 o'clock. Tomorrow, maybe part of my, I don't have the right word for it, part of my like regular habits for the day, or part of my routine, maybe tomorrow at 3, I set this to 24 hours and I click on this Oakville one. Well, I'm going to see only the brand new things that happen between today's date all the way to tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll have a whole new range of new listings, and now I can see how the market changed. There's your example, right? Ways that you can gauge the market. Just like this widget called Market Watch. Well, understanding now that the market is so large, there's 21 boards in this list. Market Watch is not doing anything right now. unless I customize it to my trading area. Market Watch, hot sheets, these widgets, they must be customized, okay? So that kind of gives you an indication of how you would approach these for the first time. And in the end, they might end up being really, really helpful tools, but you have to customize them, okay? That's the last thought that I'm going to leave with you. I did want to just say, I know we talked about this one at the beginning of the session, but there were a couple of members that kind of trickled in throughout some of the different topics we were working on. So something I really want you to be able to get back to is the video training bank. Okay, if you're ever looking for the recording of a particular session, you can access that through the members area. If you track down your external links widget, and the red link called members area, you click on that. From the left-hand menu towards the bottom, there's an option called Video Training Bank. Just like how today's session was recorded, if you click on that, you can see the training sessions towards the top here. If you click on intro, or maybe you want to just you're really keen on getting into the extra topics for this Thursday, that intermediate session, you can click on that one. And you can start to see kind of the content that might come into play there.